Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and this one is going to be with Launders, who is obviously a famous commentator. I would say most notably associated with the Blast brand, but he now does all the big tournaments, basically. So the place I would actually start, Launders, in this interview is, like a lot of people, I saw that ESL profile they made about your life. So unlike most of my interviews, I famously sort of just skip even for pros to sort of like when they're in a pro team, etc. But I actually want to ask you a few questions based on that profile, because there was a lot of like elements of mystique about your life and your background that I think probably were more, as opposed to answering questions, it made me ask more questions, Launders. So here is one of them. One thing that I never knew about you is, obviously I've seen your flag was always Canada, etc. I actually had no idea you're born in Montreal, because here's what I don't get, Launders. I thought you were one of the other Canadians. Like, if you don't know, I've known a lot of people that were French Canadian, and their whole thing is there's French Canadians, and then there's the other Canadians that are more like the Brits and the people who emigrated, etc. What? Yeah. Do you even speak French? You don't ever come off as like a Quebecois type individual? What's that?
No. I have just as much contempt for French Canadians as everybody else. A very healthy amount. I left as soon as I could walk. It was like I was a couple years old. I didn't even know I was born there until I was 5 or 6, and my mom told me. So it was just my mom came there, and then she came to Toronto afterwards. But I am very much a Torontonian. I grew up English speaking. I took French classes. I had horrible French teachers like everyone else. I hated the subject. I never learned it. No one here speaks French, really. So Connor is my only connection to the sane side of the French-speaking world of Canada.
Sure. And then along those lines, one thing that you actually did make sense, though, is, and funny enough, if you weren't there, if you were in Toronto, but I know it's the same, one thing I think is the most misunderstood thing about Canadian esports, Launders, is until basically LAN cafe culture died everywhere in the world except Korea, mate, if people don't know, it was a massive thing in Canada for like Counter-Strike. If people don't know, like all those people, Miss Harvey, every player you basically know who's Canadian came up through these LAN cafes, because especially if you were either in Quebec or Toronto was the other big one, there was like a whole circuit of like a weekend tournaments and stuff. Were you part of this? Is that what they were hinting at in the profile? Were you going to these LAN cafes?
Yeah, it's kind of wild to look back, because every internet cafe had a poster of Counter-Strike when it was a mod, and a poster of StarCraft or a poster of Warcraft 3. And those were the two games that we were just instantly exposed to. Like, we didn't even know what games we would play on a computer, because most people didn't even have, I didn't even have my own computer until I was 12 or something like that. So you'd go to internet cafe. Those are the games pre-installed, right? Counter-Strike before Steam came out, and you would just play it. You'd play it on LAN, and that actually was the reason that we got LANs out of it. I don't know exactly where it started, but I guess if you were a guy who was interested in computers, you open up an internet cafe, you're hot on Valve, you know Half-Life, you're kind of exploring it. You might have found Counter-Strike yourself as just like an avid PC gamer when it wasn't really that popular. Because even today, I think most people know console games more than PC games. Yeah. But if you knew anything about PC games in the early 2000s, you ran into Counter-Strike, StarCraft, basically Blizzard of Valve, essentially.
Because I always think when people are doing those big discussion topics that they have like panels where like, how do we get North American CS back? It's like, you can't really do it because you can never recreate the same conditions. Like, I always think if people don't know, if you came from these scenes, by the way, the only comparison as far as I know is I believe in America itself, like the West Coast had this scene of like SoCal and NorCal had all the LAN cafes. And I think there was a few in New York. But aside from that, as far as I know, it was mainly like people just at home with a PC, like you're saying. So what people maybe don't know is, as far as I know, the other good thing about the LAN cafe circuit, when it's like the main place you play, not that you go there for a tournament, is it actually automatically makes like a sports pipeline, because it becomes that famous thing like sports used to be of like, you have to be the best kid on your block and then you have to be the best kid in your city. It's like, it seems very like simple, but that kind of is how it worked back then. So if, put it this way, an obvious question to ask is, if these LAN cafes didn't exist, you might have become a gamer, but it's unlikely you'd be in esports, right? I'm guessing.
I think about that sometimes. I mean, I'd ask you, how you got into PC games and Counter-Strike as well without did you have the same LAN sort of like circuit?
But in my case, I was just the weird, like, autistic nerd kid who was in his bedroom playing all the, like, hard video games. But that's actually a thing people don't know. A reason why I can't tell someone how to make a good video game is I actually think they don't make games for people like me anymore. I was playing the games that would wait, like StarCraft and, Heroes of Might and Magic and weird RPG games, but that wasn't even, by the way, general gaming. Remember, gaming back then was like people playing Nintendo or Sega or something, or when the PlayStation came out. By the way, when the PlayStation came out, it wasn't even cool to be a nerd anymore. You were supposed to be like a jock and play like Tomb Raider and be with the boys and that. So actually, I would say I was a very weird individual, but there wasn't really like as culture for me to come up in.
I would say, like, thinking back again, like, I wonder, like, we all asked ourselves this question, what would we be doing if we didn't run into
Yes.
Counter-Strike? I'd like to assume it's also a matter of taste. That I got hooked into games that were good because I found games that were traditionally difficult, like StarCraft, and then they drew my attention for that reason. But most people were not interested in doing something like that.
Yes.
They don't really see the value in challenging themselves to learn something that's supposed to be a video game. I loved that, and that's why I still play Dark Souls in my spare time and everything. So I think I feel like it's a matter of taste, and I want to say, to remove all elements of luck from my life, to say if I went back again, I would end up playing a bunch of FPS games, landing on Counter-Strike all over again. And that explains why we've got players that are so good at all FPS games. We've got talent that are at the top. We've got a lot of things to be proud of in Counter-Strike. I think it's because the game has attracted sort of the best players.
Along those lines, though, Launders, another thing I would ask about, because this is one area we do share a similar background is in the era we came up, it wasn't actually a real industry of esports. It's more like you worry about that once you've been to enough events to pay you and all the rest of that jazz. At the time, if people don't realise, it really was like a hobbyist thing. Like, I think the best example would be things like Magic the Gathering or Warhammer or something. I'm sure there's people who have jobs within that industry, but it's not thought of as something you tell your parents, like, I'm going to become a guy who works in Warhammer or goes to, like, Magic the Gathering convent. You never even think to say that. So I think one thing that's interesting, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I feel like actually people who become pros today, it is a whole fully kitted out industry where you can start out in academy teams, or you can start out as a young caster and you can build your way up, and there's a path to pro, as it were. Right? When there wasn't all this stuff, Launders, I'm guessing a theme must be early on. Not only is there no one to encourage you, if anything, doesn't everyone sort of tell you why you're doing that? Like, why are you sticking doing YouTube, or why are you doing casting, or why you like doesn't it make you a bit of a weirdo, a bit of an outsider at the beginning before you get, once you get the success, by the way, as you see in the profile, everyone's going to go, oh, it's great what you were doing. I love that. But at the time, they didn't really make it. No one did,
Yeah. I had my friend group, all the guys in my friend group, we grew up playing Warcraft 3 mod at internet cafes. We played video games together, and then everyone started doing real jobs, and we all just sort of played that in our spare time. I was the only one who came back to it later when CSGO came out, and like all of our girlfriends were like extremely like, what is this? What is this industry? What are you doing? Like, why are you wasting your time? It was mostly like, why aren't you hanging out with us on weekends anymore?
Sure.
And I was making fucking KZ videos in my bedroom, right? And I can't even explain that. There's like no point in even getting into it. I just was doing something I really loved. So yeah, it used to be about playing for pride. It used to be about playing for enjoyment, and now you get some of the more casual and bad actors because there's a bit more money involved, and like you said, a path to achieve the career you're looking for. Whereas when I started casting, you were getting paid like $20 a map or working for free, so there was no way to make a career out of it. There was no real reason to like get into it unless you really loved it. So I think that's why a lot of the best people came in early, and some of the best have stuck around. Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point, because that's something else I was going to ask you about, which is in the modern day, you have the same problem everyone does when something gets huge and there's lots of money and fame. You can't know what reasons someone has for being in it or staying in it, or why they like move between. You can impute all sorts of like, fucked up angles, or you can be skeptical. Whereas in the era we're talking about, you basically have to actually love the game. Like, that's something I want to ask you about. If people don't know, because you actually came up, not even through like the esports side, you came up through KZ doing jump maps and doing weird. If people don't know, that is the ultimate grind. You are literally just sat on your own in a server, just doing a movement jump over and over again, trying to get a tiny bit more air acceleration. Like, that is the ultimate super nerd out shit you can do in esports. Like, that's not even esports to me. So I always tell people in the early days, esports itself, even within the game, was weird. Because back in the day, yeah, every kid played Counter-Strike if they had a PC, right? But they played it in like, Assault on a public server. They never knew there was like 5v5 Pro. They definitely didn't know there was like CPLs and to even get through all these hoops, you get into a very niche set of people. So essentially, Lawrence, it's an obvious question, but I want to ask you. This implies you're not just here because it's like, esports. So you love something about Counter-Strike. There's something about Counter-Strike really speaks to you, right?
I mean, the reason that it ended up making me money is because when I think back to my earliest memory, when I got my first computer and then I got a second computer, I used my old IBM PC. I was probably like 12 or 13. And I really loved this one surf map in 1.6. It was like Surf Mario something. And no servers had a 24/7 of the map. And surf in general was very small. So I used my IBM PC to run a dedicated server just so I could play Surf Mario 24 hours a day and like a couple of my friends could join. And then the server became so popular that people were like messaging me, like a 12-year-old, hey, do you have a PayPal? I want to buy Hook Mod. I want to like pay for admin. Like I want VIP access so I can get it at any time. And I didn't even know how to get internet money at the time. So I think in that sense, I've always had the like proclivity to end up doing something business related with what I like, but I didn't realize it at the time. I was just trying to create the most enjoyment for myself all day, basically. I think it was a little bit of both.
That's one thing I did want to ask you about, because I thought that when I watched this documentary. It's like, bro, is there just something in like Indian people to just be like hustling and everything's like you're selling? You even selling drugs and stuff? Like, what the fuck? Like, you're just drawn to that. Is there some attraction? Is there?
Yeah. Like when I was selling drug, I was like, me and my friends were smoking weed every day in the summer in the alleyway, and I was like, man, if I sold weed, we could just smoke for free every day. So that's why I started selling. Okay. And, my mind is like, why isn't everyone just doing this? Why would you spend your own money when you could make it your job and just do it all the time? Okay. So that's essentially what I've done with Counter-Strike as well. Like I've just made it my job so I can enjoy it all the time.
But it turns out, Launders, there was actually a pretty good reason people weren't doing that. You actually go to prison and it could ruin your whole life. So along those lines, you didn't actually touch on this, by the way, in that profile much. It's an obvious angle I'm surprised they didn't take, which is if you were caught up with those sorts of people, by the way, you were even somebody who didn't have like your dad around, you were in like halfway houses, you're selling drugs, you're in like a weird crowd where you're nipping out. There's the obvious line like rappers and all people in the NBA say is like, if I didn't do this, I might be dead or I might be in prison or I might have gone down a dark path. Yeah. Do you ever worry about that? Do you ever think it's possible that could have been another route in your life?
Oh, definitely. It was like my brother, because my brother in the documentary, I think he's largely why I'm such like a normal guy today, I think, because I'd go visit him every summer for the last like 10 years in Texas. And I would do that after Big Brothers is over. I was just doing it because I loved him. Right. And every summer I'd go to him and then I'd talk to him over the weekend. Sometimes we'd drive down to the Gulf of America, the Galveston, and like spend the weekend there. And I would ask him all these questions about life, and he's just a fucking wise guy. He's got a PhD. He's just really smart. Like he got into Berkeley for math and ended up doing Shakespeare. Like this guy's like really smart. So he was just helping me accelerate my mental at like such a young age. I would come home from those trips and I would tell my friends like I've got infinite wisdom. Like you need to know anything about life. Like I have the answers. I know. And then I would keep getting put in check. So I'd go through a whole year of like selling drugs, listening to rap, making rap music, doing things like that, getting close to, like getting 2 strikes, getting arrested, but not end up, very, very close to a lot of like really bad situations. But because of the good people in my life, I mean, my friends are good people. My brother's a great guy. And just those connections, I think, were just enough to keep me on the right track. But absolutely, if something went wrong along the way, you can get stuck in. Everyone's seen that situation happen to better people than us. So yeah, luckily it was them.
By the way, in this profile, obviously that's like a major key turning point in it where they have the bigger brother. If people don't know, it's the same premise as that episode of The Simpsons where Homer actually, fully enough, he actually gets like an Indian kid or something in that show, where he like mentors like a kid basically. It's like the idea that they become your bigger brother. But one thing is, right, in this thing, they did do the classic move where it's like, well, would you believe it? He's here today. They think, oh my God. But the difference is, Launders, normally people would expect, like, you're sort of expected to sort of cry, get emotional. I actually can tell from knowing you that was real. Like they really did surprise you with that. That wasn't like you agreed, right? And then he'll go back and he'll come back out again and we'll do it all. They got you at that moment, right? That touched you.
I'll tell you how it happened, actually. So it was like 2 months before I had messaged Tom myself. And I said, if you have the budget, it would be great to have Michael in the documentary because he's such a big part of my life. He messaged me back the same day, said, nah, we don't have money for that. He had already thought about doing this at that moment. So I was so convinced like nothing had happened. And then what he did was he messaged my fiance. My fiance messaged my nephew, who she met at the Paris major because she actually came to that. Then my nephew messaged my brother. And then my brother took a Zoom call with Tom because he thought it was some kind of like AI phishing scam and didn't know who this person was. Okay. And then they set it up, the entire thing, like behind my back within like a month and a half or so. So I actually had no clue. And
how long had it been since you'd seen him at this point in time, by the way?
It was actually a few years. It was a few years. Obviously, COVID just fucked everything up.
Right.
But what I did was the last time I was going to work, like, remember that G4? G4 kind of like came back and they had like me and Darth Mike go down to LA. And I was like, I'll come to do this because it's like whatever. It's like some random do a watch party for a day, get a
Right.
paycheck. It's not like something cool like casting an event or whatever. But I was like, I'll do this if you fly me to Austin afterwards to meet my brother. And I remember I got to LA and I'm about to fly to Austin after G4 ends, and my brother texts me, everything's in typos, and he said, I broke both my hands. And I was like, excuse me? Like, yo, should I still come? Like, what's going on? He was like, nah, please come. And he's like, it's like all still in typos. And apparently it was like a fucking scene from like Office Space or like some kind of office movie where you're like playing sports with your boss. He was playing squash with two doctors, fell backwards, landed on his wrists, broke both of his wrists. And then the doctors that were there eventually, like, when I got there, he was already going through surgery. But that was the last time I saw my brother, just a few years ago.
Because along those lines, one of the things that I actually found was interesting, again, they didn't try to make this overt, it's like they had a narrator or something in his profile. It's just kind of left out there for people to put these pieces together. Is to me, I took the lesson when you were talking about like the potential wayward path of selling drugs and being like a street kid, etc. And the fact that then like you start talking about how you sort of, by the way, this is also the other beauty when the industry is small. No one plans to go into esports. This is going to be my job and I'm going to do this business plan. Everyone, it backdoors it. You know, you do something, it gets a little bit of popularity, you do something else that works, you get, like you say, you get a random invite. The obvious question I was going to ask was, it sounds to me like before that you were kind of a lost person. Like you didn't have your identity for who are you? What were you going to do in this world? And then
I don't know.
Somehow through CS you found it, through esports. Is that the case?
No, I don't see it that way. Okay. I think like I have never felt like I didn't know what I wanted to do tomorrow or didn't know. Like I've both never thought more than a year in advance, but also both never been uncomfortable with what I'm trying to do at the moment. I've always just done what I wanted to do and thought like maybe in a year this will be something cool. And then I've just tried to do something new when I got bored of it. So even when I was just starting out on YouTube, I think I was going to school. I was at U of T. I wanted to be a teacher. There was no second teachable that I could do. And I was playing Counter-Strike at the same time I got addicted again. It was when CSGO came out and the game was shit. I came back in a year. It was a little bit better. And then I spun up the YouTube channel and I told myself, I was like, either I can try to make money playing Counter-Strike. I just told myself this. Or I uninstall Steam like I did in high school to get my grades good and focus on the university path. But I was never scared about it. I was basically just like, I'm going to try this. And I think that's also like, yes, I am Indian, and I definitely have like Indian things about my genetics. I think that lead me to like business and stuff like that. But my mom is very not traditionally Indian in the sense that, you know, all my friends who are Indian, like their mom would never have let them stay home to not make. I told my mom I'm not going to make money for a couple years. Oh, sure. I literally told her that. Yeah. And I also had to drop out of school, and I lied to her about exactly when I did that. That's the biggest no-no of all time, surely. Yeah. And I mean, maybe it's our risk tolerance, the fact that I was willing to just do all that and just like I knew it would work eventually. But at first I was just essentially just like, I love this game. I want to make this work. I am not going to be happy in school. And like, it's like 3 instant thoughts right away. And I just knew that I was going to go and do this. So I just went and started on YouTube. It took a little longer than I think it has for some other people who are more talented than me, but I made it work in the end.
Right. An obvious question to quickly for this topic, bridge to the present, is if you are here's the one thing, Launders, I'll give you credit for this. You are someone who will change your opinion if like some new information presented or a different angle and it makes sense to you. You were one of the people at the beginning of CS2 that was mega positive towards the game, and you actually were like very early on, you were willing to look past a lot of the flaws and a lot of things that didn't come with the game. Because remember, everyone from CSGO had hyped it when Richard reported it was going to come out as like it would have all the features everyone dreamed of, you know, 128 take, and it'd have like, remember all the shit people said that was nonsense, mate. Like, you won't need face it anymore. It'll be like that in matchmaking. By the way, these takes have aged terribly, guys. But one of the ones I remember you did change your take on very quickly was, since you are someone who cares about movement and the way the game's set up with the jumps and stuff from KZ, this is something that seems like where other people talk about the other things in the game, the 28 tick still, but to you, it is an issue, right? That in CS2, the movement isn't the same as CSGO. It's not as stable an engine, etc. Right? Is that an issue for you? Do you still care about that topic?
It's actually more of a problem of the like community getting bifurcated. So like, you know, like pro mod and COD and like when 1.6 changed the source and basically the community got split in half. I mean, I quit Counter-Strike when source came out because I thought everyone was I thought you had to switch or they were going to shut down the game. Right. Like, I didn't know that people could still keep playing. So I just quit. I was like, this is my opportunity to like stop being addicted to video games. But in the movement community right now, like, actually, like Rops at the moment is still playing 1.6 KZ. He's playing he actually set a world record at 1.6 KZ really recently, which is pretty impressive. Him and the best player in KZ history probably was a CS:GO player, Polish name Smyzenasnaki. It's not pronounced like that. He has been teaching, or Robs has been teaching him how to play 1.6 KZ. And a lot of like the best players and stuff are either going back to play CS:GO KZ or playing 1.6 KZ. But what's interesting about this is it's actually not quite about the game state. It's about the tools for the developers to make KZ again in CS2 and to rebuild the community. Like the community servers, browsers, the VScript or whatever developers need to use to make all the mods they did for like that made community servers amazing in like 1.6 and Go are not there because Valve are super concerned about like security flaws and shit like that. But with no timeline for like when they're going to allow you to like have those full tools. So I think right now we're losing some of the great people that have made some of this, like Yprac, for example, who is like, there are some people who are doing it illegitimately and creating, without Valve's sort of permission, they're creating these mods for CS2 using a language they're not supposed to because Valve hasn't said yes to it yet. And then the good ones who are trying to wait, Valve have not told them anything. So right now, when I went to the Shanghai Major, what was funny about this was Smyzenasnaki, this great KZ player. He messaged me on Twitter. This guy has never had a face reveal. Okay, he's just been like, he's got like 200 plus world records in KZ, amazingly skilled. He messaged me on Twitter. He's like, I'm going to be at Shanghai. And I was like, you're going to be at Shanghai? Like, what? No one's even seen you before. He's like, yeah, I just won this Vitality contest. They made like a movement map. Okay. They made a movement map. And then like two of the best KZ players just came and like smashed the record. They got 2 tickets. They stayed at the Shangri-La in Shanghai.
Which is an amazing hotel.
VIP access to the event. Yeah. So shout out to Vitality for that. I got to meet Smize here and I actually brought him to the Valve booth. And I said, this would be the best possible conversation because when I talk to the Valve devs about something to do with movement and then code as well, it's like broken telephone.
Right.
But if you can be here and tell them directly, then you can get something going. And one of the things that he said to the Valve devs was that it's the same shit. And I think a lot of the players who are not as good in KZ are going to be like, here are the differences, here why I don't like CS2 KZ as much. But he's like the best of the best. So it's possible that he understands CS2 KZ in a way that people will understand in like a year or two. And there's actually still some hope for things like Subtick, which are fundamentally not good, I'd say, overall. But he seems actually like, it's not really a big problem. The real issue is that they haven't released the tools for the developers to make a KZ community again. And another thing on this, because it matters to me a lot, in community servers, when I started playing KZ, I have a YouTube video of 8bow finishing KZ colors with no checkpoints. It's like a 2-hour map, and he did this, and we all got in. It was like 30 people. We all got in spectate, and we watched him do this, like a historic event for us. KZ colors was the biggest, hardest map at the time, and 8bow was the only one who could do it. And this was amazing, like to be able to be there live. I recorded it, all the reactions, everything like that. And soon after that, I kind of fell off of playing KZ. I wasn't as interested anymore. And the reason is because when you now in KZ, if you join a server, you can like global chat to people who aren't even in the same server as you. You can like make yourself invisible so you can't see other player models and they can't see you. It's become like socially isolated in a way that isn't fun because it's already pretty lonely to be sitting there, like you said, trying to get a little bit more air acceleration, work on shaving your time down by 0.2 seconds after 3 hours. And it used to be bearable because you'd be there like long jumping with your friend for 3 hours and just talking shit about life.
Right.
And now there's no like community at all. And now community server browser has been destroyed. And now there's no tools for people to rebuild these things in CS2. And the culture has changed entirely. So I think a thing that, it's like Quake, for example, it's like a very like isolating game. Like you kind of need stuff outside of the actual 1v1 to keep a community together. And that I think harmed the game by the nature of being at 1v1, not because it's a bad concept. But when you go through something grueling like playing StarCraft or Quake or KZ, you need the social aspect to keep you interested. I think it's like a huge part of why people keep playing. So we kind of lost that in KZ. So there are actually other factors, I would say, besides the actual state of the game that are the reason it's dying.
By the way, that's actually a very good analogy to make your point, because I can tell you that is the thing about Quake and StarCraft that doesn't exist anymore. In Quake, if you were a 1v1 player, obviously you only do that part of the time. That's like the hardcore competitive mode. Everyone who played 1v1 was in a CTF team, a Team Fortress team, or like a TDM team where you just play with this, because you need the social aspect. By the way, same thing for StarCraft. I always think the biggest mistake they made in StarCraft 2 was they didn't understand. Most people don't want to play 1v1 on the ladder. That's really hardcore. What they want to do is go in the arcade mode and play some silly 4-person maps or, mods and stuff. That's what people did during the day. It's just the esport was the hardcore side, So yeah, I agree. That's a great analogy, actually. By the way, along these lines then, similar question. If the KZ thing had some YouTube success, but then, for example, I don't know, you don't take a certain offer you get for a gig, or you don't go to all that, could there have been a world where you were just some nerd off in KZ? Like right now, you'd still be doing KZ stuff and there'd be no esports?
Right, my first 2,000 hours in CSGO, I didn't even play matchmaking.
Wow.
I only played KZ. And I didn't care about being a pro or making a career or anything like that. I just was playing because I liked the movement part of the game. So that's why I love Melee, has great movement. And yeah, so I was just obsessed with it, essentially. I think there came a point where I looked at my YouTube channel and I was like, I have made a video of every skill jump in the game. I made the first B-hop tutorial in CSGO. I think I did a good job with bringing the community back together from 1.6, where it was pretty much dead in CSGO entirely. No one believed in it. And I think I just kind of ran out of things to upload in regards to KZ. And there were some other people, pro runners like Nikan and stuff that were running tournaments and really cool community stuff, who are also very good to watch on streams. So I kind of just felt like I don't need to do anything more. And that's also something I do a lot in my life. It's like when I'm done with something, I just kind of leave it behind, even if I'm really proud of it. And I focus on something new because I just get bored all the time.
I have an interesting way to ask you about some of the first esports events people might have actually seen you at. Because I remember I think I first met you at one of those CVOs in like 2015 or something, where if people remember, that was when they used to have like 2 or 3 top European teams. It was a bit like ESEA finals. 2 or 3 top European teams would come over. You'd have the NA teams as well. And what they would do is, because obviously like the budget they were spending was like me and Richard Lewis or whatever, they did, and by the way, it's even before people like Henry G were like big casters. Then what they'd do is they'd have all the local NA people. So it was like people like you and Dos, but there was a bunch of people, like, put it this way, there's people I can't remember the names of that were there. And this was like a general sort of stable of casters, and they brought people in and out. And what's funny is, I'm going to lead to a thing you'll remember, which is I saw in the profile, you tell that hilarious anecdote that like Sadikist even DM'd you back like, oh, you're a terrible caster, but you got a good voice. Which, by the way, if people don't know, is just very on point for like Sadikist's personality. In that sense, he is kind of like very much who he is on camera to some degree. He's like a cheeky character who always there's like, but his charisma pulls it off. He gets away with it most of the time, right? Along similar lines, Launders, I remember I actually did tell you quite early on when I met you, like, you shouldn't even bother with this casting stuff, mate. You'll never make it. Like, look, they're like the biggest duos, like Anders and stuff. You're not going to beat them. You should just be on the desk like with people like me and Richard. Like, you could do that. Like, because at the time, what people don't know is there was not many ex-pros did that job, actually. It was people like me and Richard were the analysts. So I remember thinking, like, actually, you obviously study the game. By the way, it's way harder than to make it as a duo as well. Not even just a caster, it's like a duo, right? What I'm going to get to is this. This is the thing I think is very underrated about a certain generation of people in esports. Now you hear all these stories about like, we've got to encourage people. That sounds great, but none of us experienced that, bro. Like, even people like me are sort of telling you like, yeah, you probably won't make it. You're actually that good. Like, in a way, you have to have something about your personality. Just don't want to keep going forward. So what was the rise like in that sense? Because put it this way, you weren't the person. If I want to give a CS analogy, you were the player who had to grind 1 million hours and go through some circuitous route. You weren't some Monacy person. It was just, people laid out the red carpets. You could walk along and be a donk and be the best immediately. It sounds like you had, people don't know this, but you had many years before you were even vaguely close to touching the top, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of things there. I think uniquely about me, I think it honestly depends how you define talent, for example. Because I think my peak, I can be a very great speaker. I have a great voice. But when it comes to commentary, when I first started, I couldn't figure out how to be a pleasurable experience when it comes to listening to me commentate. Right. So I could see, in some sense, I've got better bones than other people. I also feel like I have a really good mind for the game, even though I didn't go the pro route. And I feel very in tune with certain things. I mean, there's moments now when I cast where Connor will be like, man, you're a fucking genius. Like, I can see I know what's going to happen next round. I think my number one and everyone's biggest problem is consistency. But the way that I saw it is I could see my peaks. Okay. And if you don't have the peaks, if you have the peaks, you can find the consistency. If you don't have either, go do something else. And so I felt like I had the peaks. I'm still figuring out the consistency, and that's at most people in most careers and whatever. The road has been longer in terms of how talented my brain is at figuring out how to like get to that level. But I can still see the peaks, and I can still see the consistency getting more improved. So I actually think that on the desk, I'd be a total natural. It's harder to be a commentator because of the sort of, the melody of casting. It's more than just speaking. And it's also a more important job because you're live with the action.
Sure.
The moments are stamped in history. You have to nail those. And that's why Connor does 100% of the play-by-play, because he's going to do those better. I don't ever step on his toes in that world. But when it comes to the live analysis, I really do believe in myself. I always have. And I think that I was a lot less confident socially and a lot less confident in ways that I never actually came to terms with like outwardly, but I realize that now. But at the same time, I always believed in myself in the long run.
Right.
So I think that no matter what I heard in terms of feedback, I would always listen to it. I mean, there's been many times in my career, you've said something very small to me that I've remembered. And, I remember there was one point you made, it was like back in Moscow, 1-star ladder or something like that. And you just said like, analysis has to be pointed. And it was like a simple phrase, it's just something that you were saying. It wasn't even to me, I think, but it was the idea that you shouldn't qualify every point that you make. And that alone helped me shorten all my sentences, because when you commentate, and I was a guy who's like, sometimes I felt like Rain Man. I'd have like 5 things that I loved about this round, micro, macro. But being a commentator, it's all in the time frame of 15 seconds that you have to come up with the best points. You never get everything out. So my number one issue was talking too much, bleeding into the next play-by-play moment. And when I heard that, I was able to understand I need to pick my favorite 2 things, micro, macro, fit it in, drop the rest, think about the next round, and it made me a better commentator. So I always listen to the feedback. I would always read comments back in the day. I don't read comments anymore. But no matter, and the reason is because I have always looked at comments, and at best, they have told me something that I already knew, that I just wasn't doing. So it was a nice reminder. But other than that, there was no, I have a list of things that I need to improve that I am working on constantly. I really don't need more feedback. Until I figure those things out, I'm happy. I have stuff to work on. So I've never really needed comments beyond like the quality feedback of like my peers like yourself to figure out like how to improve.
Because along those lines, again, one thing I actually like about doing these interviews, especially with someone I know, is I can also explain to people the differences of who they are now versus who they were then. When I met you 10 years ago, mate, I actually couldn't even have told you what type of person you are. You seemed like someone who, like, at least externally, you were actually quite quiet. You were just sort of like, if you talk to someone, like, I can't really remember you ever like disagreeing or making like an edgy point. Like, you actually weren't the kind of, I think now people enjoy you as a personality, and you have like a very like defined brand, and people kind of know you're always going to give your takes. Now, look, I'll say you're pretty good at doing it. Like, you don't seem to get the same ire that people like me do. You can say, you say more ridiculous shit than me or Maui ever do, mate. You'll like unironically be like, Mongols winning kind of each or something. And somehow that's never remembered. No one's told that in your face. If we say like the fucking team that comes second wins, we're hated forever. So you have pulled it off with charisma. But what I want to know is this. Does that mean way back then you were like a more introverted person or something? Did you always, like you alluded to, did you always have a sense of like, but I will make it though? Like no matter what anyone's telling me, like I'm going to make it no matter what.
Okay, this is why you see this way. It's because this is such a stupid thing I've never really told anybody. I think I smoked myself stupid when I was selling weed, and for a while I was selling MDMA, and I was just doing, and I never really went off the deep end on terms of drugs, but just the weed alone was just such a subtle beast in terms of you could just enjoy it. It made music better. It was just like so nice to do at night, playing games and everything like that. But I actually think I smoked so much weed, I created a level of social anxiety that when I came into esports, I had more social confidence before esports than when I started in esports, which is like extremely ironic, but it makes sense how I could be doing all of those things that I talked about in the profile when, I come into esports, and I am like and naturally I've always been an introverted. I'm never going to say that I wasn't, but that's why I could both sort of see that it would work in the end, but also socially I was like really anxious. I think I had smoked myself fucking stupid, honestly. And it's a really, really dumb point. But one of the first videos I made in 2014 on my YouTube channel was here's why I quit smoking weed.
Right.
I think I've privated it, but I just had a fucking epiphany. I was like, you're never going to be consistent smoking weed. Your thoughts are going to be two different places in the day and the night. You're going to have a hard. Originally, it was just to be better at playing the game, but I've found that it actually has effect. And there are people. There's always exceptions. I have A-type personality friends who smoke weed. They calm down, and it works perfectly with their brains. And I think they're actually better people because of it. Then there's like Joe Rogan who can do fucking jujitsu, do 3 hours of podcast, make $1 million, and smoke weed. But I really think it comes down to your physiology. Everyone's a little different, and I don't think it should just be a blanket recommendation to everyone that like, oh, it's legal now, you should smoke it. And I really think that like, pay attention to also like even in your family lineage if there's any mental health issues, if you should avoid stuff like that, because weed is not just as simple as like, oh, it's $10 and it's legal and it's, you know, it can be dangerous. And I think it did have a really bad impact on my mind.
When you were in these days where you were coming up as a caster, as I say, at the time, you weren't even, like, here's what's funny. When people like Sadix came along, people did kind of see them as like, hey, this is like the next, like, top caster. This guy, in fact, they even used to do that dreaded line lines. They even used to go, he's amazing. And not just for an NA caster. That used to be the thing back then, almost like players now where they consider like a second tier. So one of the things I always thought was amazing about Sadix's career was that he did break through and get treated like the European caster. He was at all the events. He was going to, even if it would cost more for his ticket back when that mattered, they'd fly this guy over, right? If at the time, I can tell you, if I was doing this interview with Dost, this section would be an hour longer. You could get trapped in the NA scene. You could only get hired for the events in your country or an MLG or an ESE or something. And there was a feeling back then of like, it's almost like the gravity of being just an NA only caster. Only Sadikisters escaped that and made it to sort of like the universe of being, you know, a real tier 1 talent. Did you ever feel like you were stuck in the mud in that sense, like you were just treading water, you couldn't get out?
You know what's interesting about this? Actually, like when we were at our last event, sort of an analogy, but Maui's girlfriend asked, "What is it like being like, you know, a person of color in industry that's like really like largely white?" And she's Asian, right? So she was just asking this out of her own sort of curiosity and like seeing that I'm like different than most people. And I told her, like, I really think that that's all a scam. That if you think about like the way that you look to other people, I mean, Lil Wayne had a line about that. He got kind of canceled for this, for saying like he's never thought about the fact that he was black. He always just knew he'd be a great rapper that'd be successful. Like I've never even considered the thought of like my location, my skin color, my anything as affecting my opportunities in the future. I always think like it's the trite advice you hear every athlete, every musician. They thank God, and then they say, they thank God, and they say that you need to believe in yourself. That's it. They always say you need to believe in yourself, and that piece of advice sounds so silly to somebody who is trying to build the start of their careers. But when you are making it, that's the most important advice you could possibly have, and you know that everyone needs to hear that in the beginning. You know, and I think that like all of those extraneous factors, like where I'm from, if the flight's a few $100 extra or whatever, it can be overcome by if I'm good enough. And so I've always had the attitude, and I want to say this and say that this is not a calculation for me. It's not something I thought about at the time when I was coming up. This is just how my mind worked. I never even considered the fact that, you know, someone might not hire me for some other reason. Let's figure out, get good enough, eventually it'll work. That's it.
Because one thing I did want to ask is I was looking on the Liquipedia where you can see all the people you worked the events with. And when did you actually officially become like the duo with Scrawny? Because I saw you did work some like Canadian events from like the years earlier, but I'm guessing that was just like a general casting group. When did it become like, you know, we're going to be a duo and we're going to try and like market and negotiate the industry like that?
I was casting with Joey Healy Umbrella, who now works at he actually works at Turner. He's a EVS, one of the best EVS in America now, actually. He's made a real career for himself doing that. We casted Sivo. Then I casted with Vince for a while. And then I casted with Van Silly since he was more local to me. And we did Northern Arena Montreal. And at Northern Arena Montreal, I had seen Connor casting a game online. It was just some random ESEA advanced match or something. And I remember him cast, it was like 10 viewers. And he was casting like it was a stadium full of people. I was like, holy shit, this kid is really good. And when I saw him at the LAN, I basically got the tournament organizers to get him into the finals to cast with me and Van Silly. And we did a tri-cast. And that was the first time that we essentially casted together. And then I don't remember exactly how we went from there to casting other events. But it was a matter of like Mark Winther asking me to do DreamHack Austin in 2016 for the first time. And then I reached out to Connor. I was like, hey, do you want to do that? And I essentially, all the people I casted with were extremely talented, but I think Connor had the highest ceiling by far. And essentially, like, I only want to work with the best. So I basically paired up with him. The same potential I saw in myself, I could see in him, and I could see it coming even sooner. So I was like, if I don't cast with him, someone else will. And that's how I got started casting with Connor.
By the way, that's interesting because I think normally I have a pretty good eye for like talent, and I've picked a lot of people out and worked with them over the years. I wouldn't have picked him as one to make it to the top launders. Like, I remember listening initially, I thought, look, he has a great voice actually. I think he has a very good commentary voice. And as people will know from that famous clip that he sort of got famous from, he also can do the sort of like, and here we go, the classic like play-by-play
That shit's
type.
whack, by the way, and I never saw it.
Oh, right,
I
you never saw it.
never saw
right.
that Reddit post.
Okay.
I don't even think I would have put him in the finals if I saw that.
No, that's what I mean. Though when
cringe.
I first saw these clips, though, I was like that. Like, look, you've nailed the voice, but like anyone could do that. It's just sort of like fucking Mad Libs, but you put in the name of the player, right? But what I want to know is, what was it about working with him early that you sort of figured out this is the guy I want to hitch my wagon to? Like, what was it about?
This is also really crazy, but I just had a fucking hard read one day. And it wasn't even in casting. We were at DreamHack Montreal. Connor is like a nobody at the time, right? He's meeting me for the first time. He's meeting Moses for the first time. And we're just hanging out, like drinking. And I remember him and Moses had this very awkward. He doesn't even know this, by the way. Connor, I've never said this to anybody.
Okay.
Him and Moses and Connor had this awkward like interaction where it was like, I'm gonna sit here, you're gonna sit there, and then they were like, no, you sit there. And then Connor just winked at him, and just like took charge of that situation socially in a way that I was very impressed by for somebody who was like meeting all these people for the first time. And that was actually the moment that I've never even told him that, but that was actually the moment that I knew.
You had the swag, something about him.
Yeah, that was the one thing where I was like, because there are some things that aren't teachable. And
Absolutely.
when Connor comes up to do a grand finals, he has that same confidence of that kid who was a nobody who believed in himself. He doesn't mess up big lines. He has done a couple of mistakes, obviously, as we all have. But when it comes to believing in the call or having that working memory to have the line prepared and then execute it flawlessly after the freestyle call to close it, and then it's a perfect moment, he does that so fucking well. And it's because of that confidence. Like, I've been working out with Connor. I also haven't told him this. I've been working out with Connor, and his name is Scrawny. Okay, he's not a big guy. Okay, but I've been taking him to the gym a lot, and he's getting like a tiny bit bigger, like 3% bigger. But when we go do a pump check in the mirror, this guy thinks he's the Incredible Hulk. He's like, yo, I'm fucking huge. And I'm like, this is like that delusional. Matt had this as well. Right. Like, they see themselves as even farther ahead, bigger, more confident than other people do. And I never try to interfere with that, because I think it's actually very important. Because any sort of small doubt like that in a very chaotic, big stadium moment is going to ruin the round. So that confidence is so important for play-by-plays.
I've got an analogy I feel like you should be able to vibe with, because I always tell people, you, and I think maybe Moses, I can't remember if it's you, Moses, or Hawk. I know there's two people that I do know that do have devices that go to CSGO. They don't have it as simple or zero. They actually have it as device because he has all the accomplishments and he had the longevity and all that jazz. So along similar lines, right? The reason I bring that up, Launders, is I've actually always been surprised that there's so few other people ever pick device, though. In fact, the one I always say I think is brutal as fuck is, bro, even his own teammates in Astralis, they were all like, it's simple. And then when they play device out, they're like, actually, it's zero. And I'm like, that's your boy. If you fucking...
This is your fault. This is your fault,
But here's the problem. This is what I want to ask you, Launders. Here's my problem, right? Look, we can all pick whoever we want, and we all have like a natural answer, I think, before we even get logically. We all have someone we just vibe with, right? And that's who our goat is. But if someone is your teammate, if they're even in the convo, like if I'm Dupree, I think I should at least, you can go, look, I think Zero was the most talented I played with, but I've got to give it to Device because, he's my boy. I think you should almost like ride for your teammate in that. So what I would ask you is this. Normally I wouldn't do this because people would feel obliged to say, well, of course, now, and there's not. Bro, Scrawny could be the GOAT play-by-play commentator of CS. True or false?
100%.
Build the case for me. Because, by the way, I think he should be in the conversation now after all. People, this is one thing we're going to get to in this interview, bro. People don't realize because of COVID how many years you guys have now been at the top. They don't realize like a lot of their favorite duos were 2 or 3 years, but you guys have done it quite a long time. So go and give me the case. Could Scrawny be the GOAT play-by-play?
Oh, yeah, 1,000%. That's without question. He's got the bones for it. He's already built up sort of like a career at this point. The big moments, his Paris intro is the thing he's most proud of. I think one thing I'm constantly like the old guard in the relationship, in the sense of I always call back on lessons that we learned from commentators of the past. And shout out to Matt, because, you know, as crazy as this motherfucker was, he has had so much impact on the way that we all think about commentary, and he was so fucking skilled. And Connor, that was the caster he looked up to. He's another Canadian play-by-play, mega talented from the same place. And never meet your heroes, though. Am I right? No, I'm just kidding. But in this situation, we have learned from that, and there were certain things that Matt's done. Like, for example, Matt will throw out a line like, here's snacks and Big Apple, hungry, whatever, throwing it out before the play starts, and that creates a really big moment. No other play-by-play casters really tried anything like that. Connor is finally starting to get to. It's gonna be crazy for him to listen to this, because I've never told him any of these things, by the way. He's getting to like the PhD part of his career as a commentator, because he's starting to write his own sort of dissertation on a piece of research about commentary that's not been explored yet. And in my opinion, that's with the trophy lifts and with the intros. I don't think anybody before him has put in as much work in making those moments consistently good with like scripts and like bringing it together for the tournaments. And so I think that his contribution now, that's his main unique contribution, on top of being consistently good in big moments, having lots of iconic lines so far, having all of those other things, and then just the mechanics and everything like that. He's starting to get into an area where it's like now no one's even really competing with him and that stuff. So I think he has started contributing at the sort of PhD level of commentary, so to speak. And I think at this point it's about, you know, more big events, more big finals, more big whatever, and more moments that are obviously more happenstance as to if something great happens in a game. But yeah, I mean, you know, most of my time is spent refining Connor, or being a mirror for him, you know, because I think sometimes he can't see his sometimes I'll be like, I'm not sure what I need to improve on, and then I'll have a lot of, I think that's what I'm good at in general, is like, here's the flaws of everything, flaws of myself, flaws of people I work with, and I think I spent a lot of time helping him sort of just point in the right direction, but he's the one steering the ship. And when it comes to helping him with the angles for wordplay, or, you know, mechanically what the hitch words are right now, what we need to not say too much of, you know, like small things that are helping him go in the right direction. But in general, he's pretty buffed out in terms of a play-by-play commentator. There aren't too many flaws that he has at the moment. I think that's the main thing I've been talking to him about recently is speech accuracy. And I think it's a sort of an underrated aspect. I think that British commentators have a naturally extremely good speech accuracy. Unfortunately, I think that's one thing that in North America, we just don't have as great speakers. I think that's something that we need to work on to buff ourselves out to be on the same level. I think what North Americans bring, sort of what British people bring as well, but not all of them. It's what you bring, but not what, like, I don't know, a nice Brit brings. And that's just being cutting when it comes to analysis, getting right to the fucking point. And I think that's something we do pretty well in being harsh. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's lots of stuff we're still improving on, lots of stuff that we're talking about and getting better at. But in terms of being the best or being considered the greatest, you know, provided everyone's healthy, I think it's a matter of time.
By the way, is it the case, because I can tell you, like, they wouldn't even mind me saying this, like, people like Anderson Sambler just quite literally had a system. It was like one round for me, one round for you, because remember, they were both sort of like play-by-play, and that was the era before you had the colour guy, and it was always the classic sports setup. So in your case, what I wanted to ask is this: is it something you guys have talked about? Because one thing I've noticed you actually do for Scrawny, which allows him to do the Sadicus thing, is you create a lot of space for him on the broadcast too. I know a lot of colours, mate, who just come in and they try to fill all the space that's not there, or they try to even, like, when they think there's not some great sequence, they try to, like, get straight into the collar because they know they've only got like 10 seconds before the end of the round. They went to the next one. You create a lot of, in fact, sometimes you leave silence even just to allow it to kind of marinate a bit. Is that something that's consciously a decision of the dynamic?
It's all conscious, 100%. We've looked at, you know, duos of the past. We looked at our own skill set, and it's essentially, I am very good at color. He is very good at play-by-play. Why interrupt that? It's a perfect formula. That way we can both get better at it. We know how to talk into each other's pauses. We still take some risks in terms of trying to talk over each other in moments where we're trying to weave. We've tried to create this also this technique of weaving in very high pressure situations where it's using our advantage of having cast together so long that we know when someone's going to take a break, even if it's only like a very short period of time. I really love the Korean style of casting in like StarCraft. That's like they're basically actually Monty explained this to me, but in Korean they're essentially just repeating each other.
Yes.
And I didn't know this. I just always thought it sounded great from my perspective because they were both kind of talking without talking over each other. So I've tried to do that with Connor, and that's something that I think that's also another contribution that we'll have that's like unique to us. But yeah, everything is 100% purposeful. We want it to be traditional, lean into each other's strengths. There have been some duos in the past where I think the analysis hasn't been as strong. Like Semler has always been sort of a play-by-play as well. Henry was doing play-by-play instead of Matt near the end. There was, DDK, I feel like, and James were just like a totally different case. I feel like our strength is extremely traditional. So yeah, it's been extremely like on purpose why we've done it that way.
By the way, along those lines, one of the things, and I will say, anytime you get nerdy about like technical aspects of like an on-camera job, we are basically just talking to like 10 people watching who can even understand and appreciate the subtle differences, because it's all super nerdy. It would be like if actors are talking, they'd be going off, glances and the way you pause for an extra second. The viewer doesn't always get that. In fact, it's actually the beauty is they don't have to think about these things. But one thing I have noticed that you guys do as a duo, since you brought it up, is I believe, because I've tried to study all the people I've worked with, I think this started with Henry. From what I remember was when Henry would cast with Sado, he was one of the best I've ever seen. I noticed Sponge, who was obviously friends with Henry and worked with him, he picked this up. You do this as well. It's actually really hard to do. When you say about weaving in, one of the things that is, if you're a rookie caster, you will fuck the whole cast up if you do this, is when you watch Henry G like I do, you know how awesome it is when Sado would be fucking spitting, like spitting bars, basically, like you're saying, some pre-prepared shit into some smooth shit, into like an amazing, right? Henry was the best ever at doing a reaction without cutting what he was saying. Like as in being like, oh my God, what? But he wouldn't then like make it so Sado had to stop, or like he's fucked up his line, or he said, and by the way, that is really hard to do. So I think Sponge does a good job. I think you're really good at it. Like essentially, it's almost like you're adding like a caster crowd mic reaction, because the crowd makes us all hyped when we hear the kills, don't we? Like that is essential. So that people might not appreciate it, launders, but it's really easy to fuck up the cast if you do that. I think to sort of have the timing down to be able to put those in without throwing the other guy, that's hard.
There's just something like disingenuous about the idea of when the moment is big enough that both people aren't reacting in some meaningful way, right? So it feels plastic. It feels like someone is hiding in order to give space, but for the sake of the casting, not for the sake of the moment.
Right.
Like sometimes people say, just want to let them. And when people do it too often, then people go, oh, you're just blowing every moment, man. Just like stop, just slow down, stop talking so much. So you're always finding a balance. And one of the biggest things that we have to do as commentators these days is keep our vocabulary fresh and definitely keep our hitch words at a minimum, because at a certain point people know every word you're going to say, and you go into doing the motions sometimes, and it's like, we did this PGL studio event, and every day is like, okay, just make sure we stay focused for like this last week. It's a studio, but it is a playoffs. We have to stay fresh. Like it's hard in Counter-Strike because of the frequency of games. It's the amount of tournaments, the amount of like in a row days that you've got to stay fresh and to not fall back into old habits like that. But yeah, one thing you said about color commentators sort of taking more space than others, it's funny because when we were at Blast like a couple months ago, Pimp and Maui had this fun conversation we were drinking where I think Maui brought up, would you rather be the best player on a bad team or a decent player on a team that won everything? And like the examples are like, would you rather be a Liege on complexity or Mezzi on vitality? Right. And I picked Mezzi on vitality every time. And I said, because I love winning, I want to win the most. But if I'm going to be, I would hate to be, the Lamborghini in the hood, if so to speak, and be in a career of just like individually showing up but not winning. Whereas I think if you ask Connor that same question, he'd pick simple, he'd pick a Liege,
right?
And I think that's why this works so well, because like I want to basically support him in every way possible, but I have no sort of like, I don't need to be a part of that big moment as it happens while we're commentating. I don't have any of that inclination to like talk and steal a moment. I only want to add as much as possible. I think that's why it works. You
do still see yourself as really good though. Like he's not Batman and you're Robin, right? You're also 1A, 1B though.
It's absolutely. And the thing is that it's about, it's like, Harry came up to me and he's like, you're the GOAT actually. And I'm like, no, I'm not the GOAT. I might be underrated, but there's like a really important difference, right? Okay. You know, like I could never be the GOAT. How could I ever be the GOAT? The most important part of a broadcast is the play-by-play commentator on a highlight. Everything else is tertiary. I'm going to be helping support make that moment feel good on both sides. I'm going to add color for the people who are watching who want to learn more about the game. I am never going to be the most important part of the broadcast, but I can still help a lot. So, and in my role, I also don't want to be a play-by-play commentator.
Right.
I don't want to be a play-by-play commentators are fucking nerds, man. I have never sort of related to that. Like their personalities, they fucking talk too much. They think they're so cool. I am not like that at all. Okay. So I like fucking niche movements, and I like studying the analysis of the game and different other things. It's nerdy in a different way, but it's not in the way of actually speaking. Like I don't want to be the best at speaking in the way that they do. So I have no problem sort of giving up that space.
By the way, you've just inadvertently dropped a detail, a bit of like sort of behind the scenes lore people don't know about casting, which is Harry, ridiculous flatterer. That's an actual problem he has as a person, by the way, guys. He's a glizzy gobbler, Harry. You won't even be the first person he's told that to. He's probably told like 3 casters they were the GOAT. Whoever's in front of him is probably the GOAT in that moment, Launders. That's how it works.
Yeah.
It's all good, though. Yeah. Everyone has their own personality. Yeah, great guy. Not the GOAT, though, I'll tell you that. Anyway, that's how different our personalities are. I have one more question about Scrawny, though, and it goes like this. It's actually quite a sort of potentially serious one, because as you said, another thing I can appreciate as someone who's worked in the industry a long time is I can see when people not only improve, but they make something like part of their brand. Like they're really trying on that. Like they've clear. So I agree with you. You can clearly see that Scrawny has understood, like in the same way as when Machine hosted the desk, he would always have those little like intros and stuff. Like other people just did the intro like the old school style. I was like, well, we're back from the break, and here we are. Forgive the Machine would have a whole thing, and here we are in the cathedral, and of course the priests attending. You could see that became his thing, right? Scrawny clearly has made these trophy lifts a massive deal. And there's an incident you might remember, I mean, sadly you will when I say it now, which is at the PGL Copenhagen Major. Luckily, it wasn't the final, it was the semi-final. I think it was the match that was Phase and Vitality. And at the end, the equivalent of the trophy lift is when you say who won the match. I believe Scrawny actually fucked up the outro and said Vitality won when it was Phase.
No, this was last, and it was the grand final.
Oh, it was? Okay. Perfect then. Because I remember when this happened, people obviously laughed because they were like, I mean, look, it is like a blooper in it. Like you've said the name of the team that bloody lost the match, and you've been like, Phase Clan wins or whatever. Whereas obviously in that moment, your whole prep and everything you want to do is nail the right one, right? This is actually one of the rare times I've sent someone a DM and be like, listen, mate, forget the haters. Anyone can fuck up one time. Like, no one's going to think that you're like an idiot or you don't know the term. But I actually wondered in that moment. He always projects a lot of confidence. Did that fuck with him? Did that get to him?
He was devastated, man.
Because there's no way to get that back. It was the last second of the broadcast, right? It just went off after that.
Oh, yeah. That's one of those moments where I think it was like a hard month. Personally, it was like some family shit in there. There was that event, and that was the last event of the year, too. So there's no like redeeming it next week. It was like the world final. And he was devastated, and like he was like, you know, I always tell him, don't get into the comments about anything. Just like keep a sort of aura of mystique about you, improve, and just keep getting better. And eventually, like people will see that. Don't worry about what people nitpick at or whatever. I think you don't want to be down there with the sheep. I think that's how I've always approached it. But he was fucking I mean, when that happened, I leaned over to him and I said, it's like right after the finals ended, and he had his head in his hands, like no one knows that. And I was like, the only crime is to be boring. That's what I told him. So like, he fucking swung for it, and like he made a mistake, and his mistake was actually writing out the lines on a notepad to be ready for the trophy lift when it happened. But he had just, instead of a placeholder name, had written Phase or whatever the wrong team was, and he just kind of just went through it. And he sent it, and the only reason it sounds even worse is because he sent it, but that's also the quality that you'd never want him to give up. Yes, you can't
second guess in that moment. You're going to just send it out to your Launders. Once you press send on the motion...
He didn't even know. He didn't even know until it was over.
No, by the way, there's one quick thing I could even ask you about commentary. Another thing people don't appreciate is you can only fix it in hindsight, in review. In the moment, once the words leave your mouth, it's like playing the concept of certain instruments, like the bagpipes or the didgeridoo is, you're having to do this like special type of breathing, where you can't think about each thing. You're sort of thinking of the next thing already. It's a bit like how rap works. People don't know in a rap cipher, you're not really making it all up. What you do is you say half a line that you know, and then that gives you time to quickly think of the back end, right? That's kind of what casting is too. Like people think it's like you don't know the player's name or whatever. No, your brain did a brain fart, and then you press send, unfortunately, and it goes out to the world.
every once in a while, Connor will be like, man, you can actually do play-by-play, bro. Like, I heard you, like, this one line, and he'll bring up a line I did. So gracious to me. He's like, dude, that Henny line that you brought up, I was like, actually nuts. Like, if it ever came time to it, you could definitely. And I'm like, Connor, that's so nice of you, bro. And I know, like, part of him wants to just give me credit for that because he gets so much credit for being a play-by-play.
Right.
And I think he wants everyone to feel what that is like. That's like the best thing that you could get. But like, I don't care. I don't want the moments to be worse because I'm commentating. So I'm not going to fall for that trick. You know, I'm making sure that he's always going to be doing it. But it's just like the best people should be doing the most important things, or whatever they're best at. I think specifically, I think that's the most important part.
By the way, the theme of this interview has been that in life, you do just pick things you want to do and try them, whether they're going to work or not, whether there's a plan for them to work or not. Along these lines, another reason I remember telling you, by the way, I told Dust the same thing. To be fair, Dust actually had a pretty good counter. I said to Dust, you should also just be an analyst, mate. You know how hard it's going to be a commentator. Not only that, you're trying to do it as a duo again. Now you're going to both have to break through. To be fair, he did always tell me years later, like, look, I didn't get invited to the desk either. So, like, I actually didn't have a choice on that one. So I was like, fair play, Dust. You know what? I hadn't thought that one through, mate. Like, you got a point there. But along these lines, right, that's another thing, Launders. It's one thing if you're just trying to be a top talent. And back then, I would have told you, literally just like, this would have been good strategy. Don't do a duo. What you actually should do is try and establish yourself. And then what you need is, this eventually happened, you need the other duos to break up. When Anders breaks up, maybe you work with him, or maybe you go with Moses, or Henry. Eventually, they all broke up, mate. None of the duos survived. Instead, you did do what Dustin and Vince tried. And by the way, they didn't make it, which is you tried to be, no, we're going to be a duo. And this duo itself is going to go all the way to the top. And it happened in your case. Was that really something? Did you actually really have the vision that could happen one day? Did you ever worry you were going to get stuck at that star ladder? You know, you go home after the group stage. You actually thought the duo could make it to the top? Because I think that's a big gamble, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, for me, it's not a gamble because, again, like I said, I don't think past a year in advance. So we think about like what opportunities we have coming up. We do the best at them we can. We continue to position ourselves well, like build relationships, you know, just like make the best product, talk to people, and try to get opportunities as you should. And that's it. And I think that it was as simple as, right? Like, I mean, like when I started doing YouTube, I had like a whiteboard and I would tally every single subscriber I got until I got to like 2,000, and I couldn't tally anymore on the whiteboard. And I remember I was holding it and I looked at it and I said, you're going to look back on this one day and this is going to be nothing. You know, you're going to be so far ahead. And that was in 2013. And I thank myself for telling myself that, because it comes back to like sort of believing in yourself. But it wasn't as if at that moment I could see exactly where I'd be or what, you know, how far along I would be. But it's still based on the same principles. It's make a good product and then keep doing it, and then keep doing what you enjoy or find something new that you enjoy and just keep doing it. And that's all we did. We made a duo. We knew we could be good. We decided to be good. We improved every event. We got more opportunities. There's tons of luck involved, but you can't think about that. It's not really relevant. You just create as much luck as possible and then hope the opportunities come. And that's the best advice that you could give anybody. But yeah, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think it could work. Whether or not it could work, man, fucking God knows, I guess, you know, whether or not there's a world where it failed. But if you ever think that it could, why are you doing it? I mean, just go for it, essentially.
Oh, yeah? You and whose army? Well, how about the Scrilluminati for one? They're the people who support my content. This video was kindly supported by The Concept, Matt Pugnatio Racula, Toucan, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Jason, Bane Diesel, Animosity, and you know it, everyone does. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion, for the long-term support. Do you want to ask a question for my AMA videos? Would you like teasers? Find out what upcoming guests I've got? You want to suggest a topic or a guest? Maybe you want to be part of one of those 1 hour lengthy online discussions I do where the topics are set by you. Well, if any of these perks or more tickle your fancy, I think you know what to do by now. Put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati, where Patreon link in the description below.